Hello, everybody, and welcome to your weekly astrology, energy, hodgepodge forecast. Whatever it is that I do it from the heart. So hopefully you find some elements of truth and relatability in the messages conveyed. It has certainly been a very interesting and busy week for me, so I hope that you also are able to take advantage of the shifting tides. There's definitely a sense that, well, all of the Mars frustration sort of came to a head, and I think a lot of us decided that we were no longer going to hold ourselves back. Certainly knowing that going forth, when Mars turns retrograde in, just after the end of this forecast period, we will, at that point, be dealing with not so much inner turmoil because the work has already been done, but probably the realizations and coming to fruition of aspects of life that have emerged from conflict or rebellion or fierce individuation. So that's a beautiful thing, because obviously from within we express ourselves outwardly, and vice versa. How we feel internally is influenced by our environment and our interaction with the outside world. Now, that's not to say that it can't potentially be a bumpy road, particularly when planets are making their shift from their forward to retrograde motion, and vice versa. So what I think we have to take into consideration, because this coming week we have Venus making some harsh aspects to both Pluto and Saturn. Venus, of course, Venus is our ability to find beauty as we perceive it. Beauty is not, external. The beauty of every aspect of our environment and our inner life and our outer life. When it goes into harsh aspects to Pluto and Saturn, we're talking about letting go of old perceptions of what drives us, what we find beauty in, and awakening to the idea of new structures that allow us to build a fresh perspective on the value of how we perceive. In other words, we are completely in control of how we experience everything. And if you are in poverty consciousness, or if you're coming from a place of frustration, then you will inevitably spend a lot of your energy and your focus on the things that you don't have, the feeling of lack, the feeling of emptiness. And of course, law of attraction has it that, as a result of that, you manifest more of what you are focused on. Now, I completely understand that all of us are not transcendental beings, and that the daily grind of human life and of emotional complexity means that it's not always easy to find smooth sailing through those processes of shifting our perception and perspective. But that's when the planets come in and kind of give us that extra nudge in the right direction. And if we're resistant, that can be uncomfortable. If we're not resistant, then it feels like flow, and it just is reinforcement of further beautification. So, which do you want? I know what I'm choosing, and I know what I'm trying to focus on, and I'm sort of in the midst of a huge experiment of whether or not, I can actually fully trust my own power of manifestation, the alchemist and magician within. And of course, the reality is that of course we can trust that, because no matter what the outcome is, it's universal will and law, and we are in perfect alignment with that. But, when we want something that we see will facilitate our lives or give us more of an experience of growth, or allow us to dot the I's and cross the T's of the past in order to move further beyond the entrapment of past mistakes that have, grounded us in things that we don't necessarily want to define our life experience by. These types of dynamism are ours for the picking. We just have to shift into that focus. So, the Mars retrograde in Aries is going to last quite some time. Mars is in Aries for 6 months total, I believe, and that's its home sign. So, in its exalted place, that means that Mars can really work for us in retrograde or in direct motion, because Mars is drive, ambition. It gets so mired in the patriarchal envisionment of the warrior and warring and antagonism and frustrations and lack of self-control. But in fact, no planet is malefic in the sense that it's there just to ruin your life. It's there to push you in the right direction. So we have to find harmony with our perception of planets. I've heard so many astrologers and tarot readers and various other spiritual teachers of whatever sort that they happen to be speak so negatively of Pluto, as the planet of death and destruction. And everything in your life has a beginning and an end. Pluto is just the experience of the ending of a state of mind, an experience, something that doesn't work. All planets are there to push us to our greatest potential, not to hold us back. Even if you have a difficult aspect in your birth chart with a planet, I have, I think, 2 retrograde planets in my birth chart. That aspect, those aspects are there to further us along our authentic journey into the individuation process of our experience on behalf of oneness. We're here to create a unique vision. And, the homogenization of society and the groupthink and the, socialization by force through political evil and corporate evil, absolutely, they want to eliminate that on every level. And that's always been the case, essentially. You may have periods in history where there's been proof that there was a love of academia that was meant to be for the purpose of the enlightenment of all. We'll never know for sure if that was really something that was democratically available to everybody, but certainly the elites have always had access to that, and the kind-hearted and well-minded people have probably always desired a universality to access to that knowledge, and that knowledge then in turn creating a group awakening of sorts to new values that allow a social infrastructure to flourish for the good of all and the planet. But up until now, while I won't speak of past civilizations as having been failures, because obviously with each civilization there must be some sort of logical key passed on in some shape or form through history. But obviously we haven't done that well yet, because look at the state of the world as it is. So that's all our journey is. We're here, as I have continued to reinforce more and more in my videos, to find joy, to be the happiest, most fulfilled version of ourselves, the most individualized version of ourselves, in order to bring our unique talents into the ether, in order to not make an imprint. You know, that's the fallacy of fame and false idols. It's to understand that each of us equally has that potency. And so, yeah, that's it. Just go with the flow, you know? Like, I know that the planets can sometimes cause a lot of turmoil, and even when we're grounded in our inner life, you know, we can't control the discomfort that we're going to inevitably experience when we're subjected to aspects of control by despots and people that genuinely have had their consciousness corrupted by having inordinate amounts of power thrown at them, or whatever it may be. You know, it's like there are always abuses, but those that abuse power to the detriment of others, I don't think that they consciously do so in order to, you know, harm other people most of the time. I think that they become pathologically disturbed by having a lack of checks and balances in their lives. And so we don't want that. That's not something to aspire to. And it's really not something to admire either in anybody. You know, fame, power, these are things that are internal, they're external perversions of something that we should be able to provide for ourselves if we're on the right path spiritually. So, wow, I'm rambling, right? There was a purpose to all of it. I hope you got it. But let's move on to the reading, or I will never shut up. Our spirit animal oracle card of the week is the lovely Deer Spirit, number 18, which adds up to a number 9, which is a pretty special number for us from the universe. And Bring a Gentle Touch is the Deer Spirit's subtext, and I will read the message for you. The time has come to be gentle and diplomatic when dealing with others. This is a big part of the Mars retrograde, is coming into that understanding now that as we work through these inner energies, when Mars goes retrograde and we have our inner revolutions, we're going to have to know how to proceed with softness and diplomacy. You might have found yourself in a situation where negotiations are necessary in order to reach your goal. Be mindful of the words you choose, but do not worry. Deer Spirit reminds you that you have the ability to be sure-footed and confident while showing humility and respect for others. You will find that your capacity for calm and grounded communication is heightened at this time. Follow the way of Deer Spirit and you will do well, gaining the respect of others and finding common ground that is pleasing to you. Remember that understanding others and their needs will be more powerful at this time than putting your own first. If you do that, you will be rewarded tenfold. Right. So, we'll try to apply that to this reading and to the energies that we just discussed. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. But I do feel that there's a heightened sense of individuated desire for empowerment and for moving forward. And rather than being in the frustration of that, perhaps what Dear Spirit is telling us is that we can find, if we find ways of being more generous and present for others, rather than just focused on our own path forward right now, we actually sort of free ourselves from the sense of frustration that we have, because we're going to move forward regardless, and the seeds have already been planted, and I'm sure you're already feeling some form of progress in your life. But too much focus on the self means that we become protective and we become closed off to the energy that could actually carry us like wind to our sails, and the sails are other people, right? Other experiences outside of ourselves. So be mindful of that. And of course, to counter that, or to give context and clarity, from the Sacred Destiny Oracle deck, we got freedom, which of course is the most beautiful concept. And I think we have a bunch of swallows there. So let's see what the message is from the swallows and freedom. Apparently they're cliff swallows. The swallow flies free on wind currents and thermals in remarkable aerial maneuvers, igniting the expression as free as a bird. In many cultures, such as that of the ancient Egyptians, the swallow was thought to carry souls to heaven. Early sailors would tattoo themselves with an image of a swallow, so if they drowned, the swallow would carry their souls to the heavens. In poor light, a cliff swallow looks brownish gray. However, in good lighting, it is a luminous metallic dark blue. Cliff swallows traditionally make their nests on vertical cliffs, carefully crafting them out of mud. Although they can nest solitary, they usually nest in colonies. When one finds a cloud of insects, it alerts the other members of the flock so that all can be nourished. Even though they fly free, their community supports them. So again, that emphasis of the interaction with the outside world being the source of levity and sustenance. The sacred landscape wants you to know that you should express yourself without hesitation, but of course, with a gentle touch. Break free and let your spirit fly. Make choices that increase your freedom. Don't be tied down. Laugh, dance, explore, and go beyond predictable behavior. Be daring. Cast aside restrictions. Find your wings. As you do, you'll help others find theirs. See, it's that infinite flow. You are not here to be ordinary or live a mundane life. You are here to step beyond limitations and self-imposed boundaries. Do not be trapped by convention or the need to please others. Choose life on your terms. Don't accept rules that don't feel right. You can be immensely free and yet still part of a loving, supportive community. And isn't that the truth? It's so difficult to trust, because when we focus purely on ourselves, we give ourselves the illusion that somehow we're more in control. But that's a really boring and not particularly expansive experience of life, right? And unfortunately, many of us, as we get older, because of injury, when I say injury, I mean hurt, emotional hurt, we then transform that into dead weight, baggage that we really ought to leave behind. And that in turn shuts us off even more from the magic of synergy with our world and our environment, So there seems to be, from all these cards, including our reading, a very, very strong emphasis on the need to not get too caught up in the individuated perspective and process, to find levity and freedom in opening up to the outside world. I know that as it was my solar return a week ago, I had quite a social experience this last week, certainly by comparison to how things have been for the last 6 months. So I became acutely aware of that. There was really something that reignited within me once I put aside fear and conditioning and allowed myself to, within reason, experience life as it's meant to be experienced. You know, whether that be taking a walk alone, but in your environment, looking at nature, taking the time to, you know, if you see a cow or a deer or a butterfly or even a bee or a wasp or whatever it may be in nature, you know, taking the time to observe and to communicate your love and your awe, you know. And if it's people, if you're lucky enough to be able to safely socialize, you know, then to be open to moving beyond the projections that we have of how other people are based upon either what we perceive them as, based on past experiences, or based on how they fit into our own narrative. You know, it's really important to let go of those if you want to grow, because if you know your own growth has been spectacular and totally unexpected and way beyond, you know, your wildest imagination, then you have to be able to find good faith in the idea that the same is occurring or can occur in others. And we can only be our own shining example to ourselves and to others, right? So that starts by eliminating projections, because to be free, you sort of have to have a gentle touch, and you have to also surrender prejudice, preconceived notions, projections, foregone conclusions. You know, throw it all out. Whatever you think about anybody in your life, throw it away. You know, if they don't evolve, then you'll experience it. You'll see that, oh, they're still doing that, or they're still saying that, or they still have this perspective. And then you have the freedom to sort of reestablish the parameters of your boundaries. But, you know, let's give everything a new chance. If we want a new world, we have to give everything a fresh start, right? That goes for your own experiences too. If you've got new experiences on the horizon, if you've got post-COVID adaptations of experiences on the horizon, just stop comparing it to what life was like before. It's the only way you're going to find joy and, you know, and ultimately freedom. Okay, I'm getting off my soapbox and I'm getting into our reading. Again, I pulled, well, it's 6 cards from the Osho Tarot deck, but they are actually a reading of 4 because 3 cards came out together. And then I took 4 Rider-Waite Tarot cards, but there's actually 5 because 1 came with a clarify. So I may consult the Osho Zen Tarot as I'm going through these cards, but I'm also just going to go off the vibe and what they sort of seem to be telling us, and I'll see where that goes. So we start with where we're coming what we're building on. Basically last week's energies gave us a trampoline onto the next chapter, and so the accumulation of all those things has led us to this beautiful concept of breakthrough. So as you can see from the image, this is somebody who has been trapped by their mind, their perceptions, all of the things that we just discussed in terms of projections and so on and so forth. They're breaking free of those because they've realized that in order to get to their heart center and radiate from their heart's mind, they have to break free of all of these restrictions, the walls, the boundaries, all of these things that have, told the tale of who they are thus far in their life. You can't make progress if you stay trapped in a wall, inside a fortress of your own making. It's Four of Pentacles energy, in the sense that, you may have Four Pentacles, and that's your choice if you want to just hold on to your Four Pentacles, but you want to get the opportunity to go through the rest of the suit to get to the Ten of Pentacles. You're going to have to let go of those Four Pentacles, right? So, presently, we're very much in strength energy, courage, and of course, again, the depiction, because these are sort of soul depictions, the soul depiction is that in having strength to shine, our environment, like the whole spiritual realm, envelops us in an auric field that energizes us. It's photosynthesis, but imagine photosynthesis on a soul level. Imagine, we're taught in school about photosynthesis. Well, I mean, some of us are, and we understand nature as being something very external, but nobody ever teaches you in biology how the elements and the planets affect us biologically and spiritually. I mean, that would be far too advanced, of course. I mean, I understand that, but imagine if a child was able to make the correlation between the effects of the sun on and water on the the combustion of life of a plant, and then how that works for us as human beings too. That would be an amazing world, right? I mean, you'd have a lot more advancement on a soul level, but we're not quite there yet. So, and what does that courage lead us to be able to do? It leads us, just to reiterate the general message of this reading, and all throughout, we get the projections card, and the projections card is the Seven of Cups in the traditional deck. And of course, the Seven of Cups in the traditional deck gives us that notion of all of the different elements in the different cups, and like which one, which of all those things is really an enrichment and an improvement in your life. Like having multiple choices, you have to get to that lover's energy of realizing that the real choice is simply in the one option that resonates in your heart. So in this case, we see it more from a human perspective, which is the same aspect of projections, being that you can meet another human being, and based on what they're wearing, or the amount of money that they have, or the car that they drive, or the way that they speak, or the level of education that they seem to demonstrate in their communication skills, that these things we take at face value when they're in fact complete fallacies. I mean, I take myself, for example. I was very lucky to have grown up environmentally in a place where we had a certain type of education that probably had a very strong focus on grooming us to fit into a certain perceived superiority of human manifestation, in terms of, when I was growing up, I had a very strong British colonial accent, so I've become very Americanized over the years of living in the US. But when you talk like this to everybody, most people think that you're extremely intelligent, So that's not to say that I speak with an American accent to appear more stupid, because I know that a lot of people find that the accent that has developed, it's an organic development of an accent that is, experienced by certain people in America as being extremely pompous, because they're not used to hearing Americans over enunciate, or most people across the world at this point, I can't speak for other languages other than the ones that I speak, but certainly in the cultures that I know through language, there's been a general dumbing down in general of people not, it's not cool to use big words. It's not cool to actually know how to master a language in order to express yourself as perfectly as you can, So that's another form of projection, right? In a way, it's like basically like, then you're trying to control how you're perceived because you want to be seen as cool or hip or, like of the zeitgeist. So, you start speaking in hip-hop lingo, and like you can't spell because you're used to texting all the time and using abbreviations and emojis to express things instead of words. These are clearly like, stupidity factors. They obviously render people more stupid in the sense that you're not using your brain in a challenging way. So that's a little bit of a tangent, but let's go back to the cards so we take a good look at the image. So, this is the real self, and then this is, I guess, to me, like sort of, certainly because their profiles tend to look, she looks a bit smug, he looks a bit predatory and angry, so it's like, the games that we play with one another. If I seduce somebody, and I put on, sexy airs, and I'm trying to like project myself as being hyper masculine and sort of, like I'm talking like with my voice down here, and that's, the person that's on the receiving end of that is going to think that that's who I am. They might then experience me in my everyday life, and they might have been much more attracted to me based upon who I truly am rather than this stupid projection that I was making of myself. And that goes for the way that we read into other people's experiences. So basically, I went off on that tirade to really emphasize that strength being about giving us the vulnerability, because strength and vulnerability are one of the same things, to observe those projections in ourselves and onto other people, and with that gentle touch, shift our focus, take our freedom to reinvent our perception, to eliminate projection. And obviously that was a firm point because I just put the card face down, so I didn't have to look at it anymore like this. So I put it back so that, because it is central to the reading, obviously it's a big deal. Of course, when you remove those projections, what are you left with? A blank slate. But of course, this is a perfect depiction of that, because as you can see, if I go like that, it looks like it's black. As soon as it hits the light, you can see imperfections on the card, probably from my grubby fingers, and the light is there to change the dynamism. And that's sort of an excellent metaphor for the idea that once we've stripped ourselves of these restrictive views of projection, we become the fool. The fool as in the tarot fool, not a fool in the contemporary sense of the term. The beginner's journey. That's having that zest and pep in your stride that you probably feel that you maybe haven't had for a really, really long time, and that you associate with the boundlessness of adolescence or childhood. So the excitement of freeing ourselves from the imprisonment of projection and psychological warfare totally gives us the opportunity to step into massive new realms of understanding and expansion. And we get that through this double whammy of the Three of Cups celebration and the Eight of Wands, which in this case is traveling. So we have celebration and traveling. It's, again, I think we've talked about this in one of the recent readings, because it is kind of fascinating to me that, the Eight of Wands, which in the traditional tarot is all about communication and messages, is purely focused on traveling. I mean, in this case, it's also a little bit of like, on the astral plane, because these are, it's a soul level. So, maybe it's also, maybe that is what it is for you individually. It might not be in your external world so much that there's this like manifestation of a shift, and it may be more a personal celebration of your ability to tap into a new form of spiritual freedom, which may be having a dimensional experience that is beyond anything that you've understood thus far. That's also a big bruise on me for some reason. That's also a possibility. But whatever it is, it's a giant expansion, and it's something to celebrate. Putting those up there again, because I find that very inspiring, and certainly something that I personally am focusing on and very much looking to manifest. Beautiful, beautiful energy. Now let's take a look at the more mundane interpretation of those things through our tarot, and right away. I just want to emphasize again, when I say mundane, I do not by any means speak of, there being something mundane as in boring and bland in these depictions. It's literally more the idea of the Zen tarot for me ends up really expressing our frame of mind, our psychology, our spiritual journey experience. It's how our higher self experiences the journey. And then the Rider-Waite, I feel, for me, expresses more of a sense of the terrestrial, how we take that higher self experience into our manifested reality. So again, we get a mirror image because we got breakthrough and courage as those first cards in the Zen tarot, and here we have the double meaning through the King of Swords clarifying the Four of Cups, which we've had before recently. It's the idea that the King of Swords is somebody who understands their truth, is solid in their foundations of their understanding of life and their journey. They've reached a new apogee in their manifestation of thought and inspiration, and subsequently this has allowed them to put an end. This King of Swords cuts the crap out of the human manifestation of the soul by basically taking us out of the inner journey and making us embody those inner specks of enlightenment, taking those into our outside experience. So it's a clear indication that last couple of months have really been conditioning us for this next stage, which corresponds to the fall or autumn or spring if you're in the southern hemisphere. You know, it's a shift. You know, those in between seasons, you know, in between the extreme of summer and winter, you know, are huge transitional periods, no matter where you are or how you're experiencing them. So of course we're moving into that energy. But because we've been so insular for the last 6 months since springtime, or fall if you're in the south, all of that can only mean that we are naturally encountering its counterpart, right? So you do the math on how that's going to manifest in your world, but it's a guarantee that if everything is just exactly the same for you now as you move into these energies as it's been for the last 6 months, that you have to do a little bit of rerouting. Doing that work, in turn, brings us into our current state of mind and headspace, which is the King of Wands. The King of Wands is the epitome of self-confidence, self-worth. This is a person who is so inspired that they see their role as being to inspire others. And to take their place in the world. Again, it's like all this inner work, you know, it's not for nothing. It's, you know, we have to eventually graduate and then move on to the next chapter of challenges. You know, I hear this so often from people in conversation, certainly like people that are a little bit sort of, how would I put it, naive or less exposed to the idea of the esoteric and metaphysical realms, and they tend to have this idea of everything having the end goal being I guess an offshoot of peace and harmony is really what it is. But what they think peace and harmony are is some sort of blanket end of the road where suddenly there's nothing changes anymore and they just plateau in a state of happiness. Well, that is just simply not a human experience, and anybody that thinks that they're having that experience is going to probably experience a big tower moment, right? Because it's simply not what we're here for. We're here to have evolutionary experiences that allow us to become the best possible version of ourselves, and that's not for us to judge. We don't get to decide when it stops. I mean, you could take your life, you know, but again, if you've reached the point where you like want to take your life, then what do you have to lose by switching everything up and trying to be and do something completely differently, right? So that's the beauty of life, you know. It's very painful at times, but it's an extraordinary, amazing journey, you know. I can't remember who wrote that, but, you know, it's the idea that, you know, the end of your life, you want to be in amazement, you know? You don't want to be like, oh, God, like, pull the plug, please, you know? You want to be in amazement. You want to be like, oh, my God, what an amazing experience this has been. And I may feel the human propensity towards sadness around the idea of loss because I'm not going to be able to take all of this with me, but the more we understand the finite aspect of the terrestrial body in which we're in now, the more appreciative we are of the opportunities that we have to keep evolving. That's all I can say on that. I don't see any sadness in any of it. I mean, of course, we all have pangs and we all of sadness when we're separated from people that we love. But, you know, we all had to leave our parents' home. We all had to individuate at some point. We've all been through that. And it's just trauma programming that makes us avoid doing that again if we are avoiding doing it. But it is counterproductive and counterintuitive to not give yourself the experience of newness all the time. Just saying. Now here we get the message that comes totally as a symbiosis of these cards. And that is the beautiful Six of Pentacles, which is the card of as above, so below, as within, so without. It's the yin-yang flow of infinity, of I give and I receive. I carry the scale of justice by being able to feed the needy, but you know, it's the idea that this person has everything that they need. So they're able to do that, right? It's not, this person's not gloating. They're not like reveling in the idea of their power. They have come out of the comfort of their castle in order to be the light to others. And in turn, they receive more. They don't need to receive more riches in the materialistic sense because they have them. You know, that's kind of a literal depiction of like what wealth should be like. And when we see what we see as depictions of evil in the world, it's really usually when people have received that wealth and don't choose to share it. You know, I guess pathologically what that does is it cuts off like the empathy within a person to be that guarded about their wealth, and therefore they stop having a full human experience, and therefore it's easy for evil to slip into their mindset and their soul, and subsequently they lose their way and they cause a lot of suffering in that process. But we don't need to focus on those people. We don't need to give them any more power, right? Our outcome of what's to come and what's to be looked forward to. The Empress. How can you go wrong with the Empress as an outcome card? This is fertility, abundance, in its possibilities. It's being in the fullness of knowledge of your power in order to create, inspire, evolve, teach, receive, mother, nurture, and be at one with nature, because that's what the Empress represents. I mean, she is like the depiction of Gaia in human form. And I'm going to take one clarifier on that because, well, because why not? It's a little vague. I knew that was going to come. The Eight of Cups. So again, what this is about is not getting stuck any longer in trying to hold on to what we have, and knowing now that whatever journey we've been on and what knowledge we've accumulated, particularly in this incubation period, which is how I've seen the entire lockdown, and it's going to continue for some people where they're more restricted in lockdown. I'm not saying the contrary, but I'm just saying that we now have the power to adapt and grow beyond, you know, certainly beyond the fear, certainly beyond the feeling of limitation. It's time to tap into your inner self to find new ways to challenge that. If you are restricted in any way in your life by your health or by your environment, express the beauty of who you are in newness, letting go of all that has defined you in the past, so that there are no projections upon others or upon yourself, because we do that too. We project things upon ourselves a lot, right? So the Eight of Cups is in correlation with the Empress, is not a negative thing. It's not a painful process, stepping away from things. It's simply acknowledging that abundance exists no matter where we go, because the abundance is within. So you know what? You want to get to your 9th cup or your 10th cup, you sometimes have to leave the 8 cups behind that you've already got. It's not to say that they're not good enough, but they're not enough for the seeker, the wanderer. So in the weeks ahead, we'll probably see how that path unravels. But in the meantime, that is all I have to share this week, and I hope that it was helpful to you. Certainly an inspiring reading for me, so I wish you the very best on your journey. We'll see each other next week, hopefully with developments to share that reinforce all of these beautiful messages. Namaste.